It's been too long without an episode on the 80s/90s GTP cars, so let's not waste any more time. Welcome to yet another episode of Street Track Failures, where today we're at a horse racing track. No wait, I thought we were doing racetracks for a different sort of horsepower. You see, we are. As in 1987, the parking areas outside of the Del Mar Fairgrounds were converted into a temporary racetrack. Now, I know what a large number of you are probably thinking. Oh no, not another street circuit utilising car parks. However, to my surprise, this track isn't utterly terrible. Measuring in at 1.62 miles / 2.6 kilometres in length, this track apparently had 10 corners. Now, personally, I'd love to know how this was worked out, as I personally count 18 corners on this track. Sure, some of them are barely corners, but most of these sorts of turns are still classified as corners on track maps. Anyway, potential corner miscalculations aside, let's go over this circuit in more detail, naturally beginning at turn 1. Really? Are we beginning with one of these things already? Alright, fine, let's just get this one out of the way. Despite the approach being quite narrow, particularly given the GTP cars back then were wider than most aircraft carriers, this was one of the better overtaking places on the track, as well as be a hotspot for trouble. Other than that though, a fairly nondescript corner. It's then onto a clunky section of circuit, two slow lethargic left-handers with the narrow confines providing a perfect example of a place where you perhaps shouldn't overtake. But don't ever say to a racing driver that you can't overtake at a specific section, as they'll still try to all the same. Whilst rare, attempted passes wouldn't really work, causing pile-ups and the ungainly sight of watching these thoroughbred racing machines do 3-point turns. See what I did there with the thoroughbred comment? You know, because of the horse racing track and the cars being... okay, I'll move on. The circuit stays very narrow as you come up to turns 4, 5 and 6, but the speeds increase tenfold as you arrive at a fantastic section. A fast left-hander that flows really nicely into a couple of flat-out curves. Absolutely zero room for error at this corner, requiring total commitment if you want to get any speed out of it whatsoever. Then, as you exit this section, it's hard on the brakes for the tightest and narrowest section on the track. It's a small left-right chicane that leads you onto a really tight left-hander. You certainly can't go side by side through this section easily, especially on the 1987 edition, where there are walls right up against you. In fact, the only good thing that I can think of with this section is that it gives you the chance to do some GTP gymkhana. The room for error was made wider from 1988 onwards, but after coming off such a lovely portion of track a couple of seconds ago, you're brought right back to earth with typically fiddly chicanes and near impossible places to go side by side. You'll be glad to know that as you come out of this section, the speeds pick back up once again, before we come to perhaps the most satisfying corner on the track. With the track opening up dramatically on the inside, it's a fast left-handed sweeper, which is made trickier by how bumpy it is. Seeing the sparks fly and the car jolting around on the non-existent suspension travel that they had was great to watch, especially in the latter years of the event when the cars got faster and faster. Although you may notice that the width that this section once had has now disappeared. But we'll come on to why later on. What makes this corner so brilliant is that immediately after it is a tight hairpin, which in cars like these will make braking tricky as the rear will want to brake away from you. This could also be a potential overtaking section, especially in the earlier years of the event, when the inside of the hairpin had no barriers with just some harmless markers trying in vain to stop you from cutting across the curb. This was changed later on, but like I say, we'll come on to why later, I promise. Now, the upcoming section had two different layouts. The first one had a sharper hairpin before a sharp right kink would lead you onto a sharp left kink, with the right kink being the only corner on the track where there was at least some margin for error. But afterwards, the hairpin was slightly less sharp, but because of that, meant that the right kink was no longer required, and instead you just went straight to the fast left-hander. Not that you'd think that by the track maps used on the TV broadcasts, as despite the right kink not being there, they still used the track map graphic of the original layout showing the right kink being there. But the even weirder thing is that they did update the map as they included the new pit lane location, yet they still showed there being a right kink after the hairpin. Either way, that aside, once you've gotten past the phantom right-hander and existing left-hander, it's then onto another tight sequence of corners. A right-hander that isn't quite 90 degrees in radius leads to a Mickey Mouse left-right chicane. Again, near enough impossible to go side by side through here, but a good exit will give you the needed momentum to try and get past the car ahead of you at the first corner. Although, seeing as we're at the first corner again, and we've already gone over it, it means we've done a full lap of the Del Mar circuit. With all that being said though, it's about time that we went onto the pit lanes, like I said I would, multiple times. From 1987 to 1990, the pit lane and start-finish straight would be on the straight between turn 1 and 2. And to be honest, there isn't really anything glaringly wrong with this. It looks as though it was the most sensible place to put the pit lane on this track. Particularly if we were to compare it to the one used from 1991 to the event's demise in 1992, which was now on the inside of the fast left-hand sweeper, hence why all the space that was there before is no longer there. Not really sure why the pit lane was moved, to be honest, but for me this does seem like a bit of a downgrade. I can only imagine that because of the extra space it gave better hospitality possibilities, but even so, I think the original one was more suitable. So this event ended in 1992, mainly because some of the buildings at the Del Mar Fairgrounds were being updated and remodelled, and because the updates would impact on the current track layout, the race would no longer be held there. Although this race was fraught with issues before it even started, with the race having to be delayed a year from 1986 due to the local community not being particular fans of it going ahead. But thankfully, as the years went on, people were starting to warm to it. However, to me, as a racing fan, I think this is quite a good circuit. Yet it doesn't mean that some sections frustrate me. There are some wonderful pieces of asphalt on this track, but every now and again is tainted by some really irritating Mickey Mouse sections. I'm not opposed to these sort of corners, but it's more how the lovely flow that this track builds up gets interrupted in such a way that the flow then almost goes away completely. With all that being said though, would you like to see this track return? Say in the comment section down below, along with any other street circuits you'd like to see featured in this series. In the meantime though, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, then I would be enormously appreciative if you did hit the like and subscribe buttons. But until the next video, be kind to each other and enjoy the rest of your day.